Thank you, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next guest is one of the busiest people on the mic. He's a co-host on Ebro in the Morning on Hot 97. He hosts sports shows on ESPN, podcasts, wrestling shows, and now he's another white guy with a late night show. Via Complex Magazine, you can catch all things hip-hop with him and a rotating group of guests and panelists on Open Late with Peter Rosenberg. Everybody, please welcome Peter Rosenberg.
Yay!
And now, another white guy with a late night show is not, that's in your own words.
Yes, yes.
That is how you introduced yourself on the first show.
Yes, I thought it was, I don't know, I felt like in the time that we're living in, which has been really cool to sort of watch unfold, a sort of surprising byproduct of the Trump presidency, in my opinion, has been watching tons of, a really diverse group of people get opportunities. Mm-hmm. And so, to me, for me to get up on my first show and not point out the fact that me, of all people who really believes in that idea, like I could not ignore the fact, well now, yet here I am, a white dude hosting a late night show just like we always grew up on.
And a late night show that is specifically about hip hop for the most part.
Specifically on black culture, I mean, for the most part. I just thought it was important and a part of who I am to point it out. I don't feel bad about having the show. I wanted the show. I'm excited to have it. I earned the show. I worked my ass off for this opportunity. But at the same time, it was just a little message about who I am as a person, and that, like, of course I'm going to acknowledge that because I know that thought exists. All I was obsessed about last night was like, our first episode, we're up against Atlanta. Like, what are we doing? Like, when are we going to do this? And they're like, it's YouTube. It's cool. People can watch it later. Relax.
Right.
But, I thought it was important to say that.
So the show airs every Thursday night on YouTube, and then obviously it's up, and people can, it's, via on demand. People can watch it whenever they want afterwards.
Yes, you can watch it right now. You could go if you go to Complex's main YouTube page, it's just sitting right there.
And last night you had Bow Wow, and you had A$AP on it as well, which was like a pretty great performance, and a very long interview with him, very in-depth.
Yes, we had Bow Wow on our panel. We had In-Depth with A$AP Rocky, and we had Rich the Kid performing his new single, which is really popular. It was a pretty great... I was very pleased with who we ended up getting, which, as I'm sure you can identify with, can be a stressful... Booking can be a stressful process.
Well, booking your first show for a late night show is probably the most stressful process, because when you have a morning show every day, it's like, get me someone in there, and eventually a big person will come in, and that'll be a great day. But if you have once a week to hit your mark...
Right.
You're just going through it being like, oh my God, is anyone going to tune into the...
Yeah.
Oh, we got someone.
And when we just knew, if we had a very specific list of like, who's the caliber of person that we want. And within that range, the people, and by that I mean, it's like a stretch to get them, but we could get them. And that was honestly, that number of people was under 10 of total that I thought was week one worthy. I mean, that I really thought was like a real star that made sense with our audience, that I could have a good connection with and some story with. There weren't that many. I didn't want, it's not an arbitrary actor promoting a movie. It's like, no, we needed someone from hip hop who people relate to, people like, and Rocky's sort of on the Complex Mount Rushmore. Yeah. Complex is a network and magazine and culture that was sort of, you think about Complex, anyone who's familiar with it knows it's like Cudi, Rocky, Travis, Kanye. Those are sort of the names.
Are you trying to get Kanye? Did you reach out? He doesn't really have much that he's promoting, right?
Oh, he's going to soon.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Does he have a new album coming soon?
I think he will very soon. Yeah, I don't know about the next... my guess is by summer's end, there's a Kanye album.
Makes me very happy.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. Now, listen, I'm going to call Scooter Braun, and I'm going to make the pitch for getting Kanye, but it's tough. I mean, I'm not close with Kanye at all. I've interviewed him a few times. We've had sort of it's always been awkward. Like, we are two people who, for whatever reason, if you ever go on YouTube and you type in our names together, every time we've intersected, it is in some sort of documented awkwardness in some way.
Why do you think it's so awkward between you and Kanye?
I think that I love him as an artist so much.
Yeah, I do too.
And I don't think he knows that. So I think he ends up hearing of maybe me saying things that are like critical. I mean, someone of Kanye's level, you talk about practically every day. I don't even remember every take I've had on Kanye.
But do you also feel like there also, as much as you or I love Kanye, there isn't enough in the love in the world for Kanye to sort of eat up and have, and anything minorly critical is like
Okay, for example,
pretty devastating to him emotionally at times.
so first one that pops in my mind. There's a video, if you were to go on YouTube and look it up, of me talking to Kanye. I'd maybe been at Hot for 3 years, and I didn't have an interview with him, but Angie did. Angie Martinez did. And so Angie finishes her interview with Kanye. It's the day 808s and Heartbreak came out. And so I'm like, I'm just there with a camera guy, and I'm like, I think I had a camera guy with me. And I said, can I just get 5 minutes with you? And he's like, sure. I'm like, I'll follow you out. So I have a couple interviews like that of me following people in the elevator, Hot 97, and that's one of them. And I'll never forget it. Right at the beginning, I was like, hey, Kanye West, how are you, boys? I'm good. I said, new album's out today, kind of a big deal. And he goes, kind of a big deal?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it's kind of just a catchphrase people say. It's not a real, it's like, I think it's a Will Ferrell joke. It's not a real.
Like, it is a big deal. It is a big deal.
It's a huge, it's a huge deal. So that sort of typifies it. Then there was another time, my first interview with Drake, which is backstage at SOBs. Kanye West walks into the dressing room. I'm like, oh my God, Kanye's here. And I just start going. And he's just like, I'm not here for an interview. And just like, I was like, oh, sorry, what, that, and he walks out, awkward number 2. And there's a couple more. We do have one. Cypher Sounds and I interviewed him for Juan Epstein, and that exists. You can find that in full. It's about 25, 30 minutes long, and that's not awkward. That's a good sit-down interview.
How do you ride the line interviewing, one, guys that you, or artists that you love, but 2, also getting the information or the stories out of them that the fans want to hear as well? It's a very thin line to walk sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big gossip question guy. That was actually part of one of the things we had to deal with in last night's episode, which is that A$AP Rocky was there, and there was a conversation I had to ask him about his relationship with Travis Scott, and I was up front with him before the show. That's who I am.
Yeah, I do that too.
Yeah, I went up to him and I said, I want to get news on my first episode. I said, I'm not gonna blindside you, but are you comfortable with me asking you about a few things? He's like, let's just do it. I trust you. And I said, okay. So I did it. Normally, that might not even come up in my interview. Most of the reasons that I found that people enjoy my interviews is that I like to talk about the deep cuts. Yeah. I like to talk about the random things I remember. I have a sort of savant-like memory about hip-hop things, so sometimes I can point out something that they don't remember. I'll be like, do you remember when you did blah, 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 blah?
What happens to you when you get an artist in front of you who does like to play off the gossip, though? Do you ever find that? Like, because I'm the same way when I interview actors and directors. A lot of the time I have deep cuts, and I like talking about the process and everything that goes into it. But when I'm suddenly confronted with someone who is kind of...
Like, let's get to the meat.
Is kind of excited about the gossip, or that's all they really know how to talk about. And, right. And then they get kind of thrown off when you're not really going there. Do you ever have that?
No, I don't. The only thing I can recall is that when I can tell someone's getting into promo mode, where they're like, so, I guess I got to talk about Steve, here's the thing about Steve. And I'm like, oh, here we go. He's obviously going to talk about Steve. He wanted to do this. I just find myself feeling awkward and sort of like, all right, well, you don't have to. I'm not trying to say I'm a saint. I just really have tried to avoid being that, to my detriment. I mean, frankly, it has not served us well. We're just fine, and we've done really well over time.
But in terms of making news, it has.
Yeah. Oh, we don't make as much news on our show as our counterpart does.
You probably get really good guests because they're you get the big artists.
And we just have good relationships, and I think we have actual respect. I realized last night when we did the Rocky interview, I spend a lot of time getting in my feelings about wanting to be bigger and wanting to be more impactful and wanting to do better stuff. And I realized when I had the conversation with Rocky, I was like, oh, that was something I could do. Mm-hmm. That was something that my last 10 years and the way I've carried myself allowed me to have that interview. There are other people who may have, in my mind, when I've been in my feelings, I would have been like, damn, I need to be like them. Look how big they are. Look how successful they are. But they wouldn't have gotten that moment because in order to get to that spot, they had to burn a lot of bridges along the way. They had to say a lot of things that you can't really walk back. And ultimately, I don't have a lot of those things, and the things that I should have walked back, I did. And I got on the air and would say, hey, so-and-so, I got this wrong. I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I was in a moment. I was on the air. I'm talking with my friends every day for 4 hours live in New York. Sometimes I say things, and I try to be as apologetic.
You actually opened the show with saying something like that last night. You talked about Cardi B, and you said, I got it wrong.
Yep, and I still feel bad about Cardi B because when I first talked about her, she was just a person doing Instagram videos, getting a lot of views, doing these really dirty, funny sort of IG videos. And it didn't resonate with me. And I'm not a person who just is going to get on the air and say, yeah, it doesn't resonate with me and look away. We do a show. So I was playing the role of like, nah.
You got to riff. You got to rip on it.
I don't think it's funny. I don't get her. What? Blah, blah, blah. You start making fun of it. And like, as time went on and she started becoming Cardi B, I was like, oh, that was just like one like character she kind of plays, but she's really dynamic. Yeah. And so she came in, and I told her that to her face, and she was cool, but I could still just sense a little bit more of like a wall with me than my co-hosts, and that bothered me. It still bothers me because Monday when she came in, I was traveling back from WrestleMania, which is, I work for WWE. It's an unmissable event for me, and I couldn't be there. And I fought with the label because I really wanted to have that moment to her face again. And instead, couldn't do that, so I led my first show on Complex about saying the same thing, which is like, man, I really got it wrong with Cardi B. She is a very special person. I just think hey, dude, you get it wrong sometimes. Sometimes albums come out like, this is it. This is a classic. I nailed it. Kendrick Lamar, I nailed it. And
it's just you.
In my world, I get a lot of hate for being Captain Kendrick Lamar. It's like a thing of like, Rosenberg and Kendrick Lamar. We know, but sometimes I say they're just mad because I pushed all my chips in on Kendrick Lamar, and I got it right. He was worth pushing the chips in on.
Yeah, he's incredible.
He's been flawless.
He's an absolutely incredible talent.
Cardi came up. I was like, nah, I'm good. Got it wrong. She just completely popped off.
There's a difference between someone who is going to have to sort of manage themselves well, find the right team, and put together like an album, and a savant who is just simply going to probably produce incredible work, whether he had a team or not. Well, he would probably just do it on his own.
Well said. That's very well said. And whether or not, like, Kendrick was going to be special, whether we got to find out about him or not. As an artist.
You could translate that to other pop stars as well. You know, there is someone's like a Taylor Swift where it's like, well, if she gets the right team together, maybe she'll get the #1 single.
You and I are very simpatico.
Yeah, and then you look at someone like Lorde, and it's like, no, she's a pretty amazing talent.
And they happened to find her, well. and it happened. Yeah. Kendrick. I always say that Kendrick Lamar was the artist that like I was always waiting for. So when I started doing my late night show in 2007, and every Sunday night I have 2 hours. I still do, midnight to 2 on Hot 97, where I play whatever I want, and I'm very blessed, and it's a joy in my life that I have that. And as time went on, I'd play a lot of records. People would come and go. Some are still around. Some did pretty well. There are lots of other ones I've supported who I'm happy with what they've done. But Kendrick, after Section 80, the first record I ever played by Kendrick is a song called Ronald Reagan Era. And when I first started playing him, I was like, oh, this guy's... I'd been hearing the buzz. I was actually a little late in my opinion, but I was like, I'd been hearing about him, started playing, I go, oh, this guy's good. And then it gets closer, and it's starting to lead up to his first Interscope album, and I'm like, oh, this guy's really good. And I just started getting on sort of my soapbox about it. Partially it's because I love him as an artist, but partially it's because from the standpoint of hip-hop culture, I viewed Kendrick as very valuable and had the opportunity to do something that is special, that the artist that I grew up admiring would be proud of. So that I was like, he was the perfect storm of everything. He's got Dr. Dre. He's got the music. He's got the skill. He's got the respect for the culture and the music. Politically, socially, he's just a good person. So I just went completely in. There are other people like Rocky who I've supported who are phenomenal, but I admittedly kind of put Kendrick at the forefront of that because I thought he had the best chance to positively impact the culture.
You know what I don't understand about Kendrick, and I think Kendrick is absolutely incredible, but I still don't understand. I think I read recently that his most recent album went, platinum or gold or something. I actually don't understand that because I listened to that album and I'm like, how is this something that people are like normal people are listening to in their home? Because the production on this is still kind of crazy and it's incredibly dense. How is this essentially a pop song at this point? And multi-platinum, it's crazy.
You deserve credit for your hip hop interviewing chops. I agree. That's another really great point. Talked about the same thing. Damn is dense.
Insanely dense. Yeah.
To Pimp a Butterfly is even more dense in my opinion, but Damn is dense, and it is a listen that requires some. My first listen, I remember going through and I was like, "Ooh, do I not love this?" I said, "Am I gonna have to go on the radio? Am I gonna have to like call Top Dog and like warn them like, hey guys, and just to let you know, I'm really not that into this album." Like I was starting to think about that on the first 3 or 4 songs.
It's headphone rap. I put it on in the car and I was like, no, I can't do this. I need to like.
You want to hear every bit of it.
Yeah, I want to go for a walk.
And then it gets to 8 or 9. I'm like, oh. And then I went through a second time that first night, and I was like, you know what? This might be his best album. That's where I went in one night. So he's very special. But you know what? There are a lot of there's like a handful, 5, 6, 7 really special artists of the same time. To me, this is a golden era of hip hop, and a lot of older fans hate that. They don't believe it. They think I'm nuts. They think it's a lie.
Who are the others, in your opinion?
Okay, I would say that over the last several years, this is a golden era because of chiefly, and I'm going to forget people, but chiefly, Kendrick, Chance, Drake. Whether you think Drake's commercial or not.
Not my bag.
Drake has the single biggest collection of hits ever in the history of hip hop, and it's not even close. Second place now is starting to get like blurry in the background. And then within that, he has some hits that even the people who have been critical of Drake will be like, well, yeah, I don't really like Drake, but I do love Starting from the Bottom, though. I mean, I love Back to Back. I mean, so even within mixed feelings on Drake, I still think he's an icon. A$AP Rocky has 2 just beautiful albums. Childish Gambino. That is, I mean,
last Gambino album is pretty special.
And it's my least favorite.
Oh, really?
Yes. It was just not what I wanted at the time from him. I wasn't quite ready for it.
Well, it's clearly just like, let's do Funkadelic.
Yes.
Let's do Maggot Brain. And I was like, yeah, sure, that's great.
Right, and I was coming off of being in love with like Sober, which was like the most poppy, easy, and then it just wasn't quite. I didn't know Redbone was going to become a generational song. You will know Redbone till the day we die. It'll play forever. J. Cole. And then there's other people who are like right there who I think are incredibly special, but just haven't necessarily had the album that garnered them the respect they need. Oh, I forgot Travis Scott. Kid Cudi is still active. But then there's Joey. There's Action Bronson. Joey Badass, that is. Yep. There are a lot of artists who I believe are also in that ilk. That's like 10.
You didn't say Kanye. Has Kanye passed?
Oh, my God. Yeah, well, Kanye's in the Hall of Fame already.
Oh, okay.
Kanye is an absolute first ballot, highest level Hall of Famer, borderline Mount Rushmore. I mean, I don't know there's a rapper, I don't think there's an artist who has a body of work with a higher percentage of music I love than Kanye. Yeah. Song for song in his entire catalog, everything he's ever done, he hits with me at like 85%. Like that I'm like, oh, I really love this song.
I'll say he's one of the few, and this is from a person with a limited knowledge of hip hop, but in my opinion, all of the hip hop that I've listened to, he's one of the few artists who actually creates like full soundscape albums, beginning to end, locked in. You're there and ready to go. There's no filler. It's all really, maybe with Life of Pablo a little bit, but
no, but even even Life of Pablo, I actually think the filler. And Kanye fans would think this is just outrageous, but I actually think for me, if you want to go find filler, you can find some in College Dropout and Late Registration,
yes,
which
I would agree.
Both a little bit long. When he gets to Graduation, he just gets into perfect zone. Graduation has nothing extra. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy may be the best rap album of all time. I mean, it is flawless.
Yeezus is like a Black Flag album being done by a rap artist. It's amazing.
Yeah, and Yeezus is, it doesn't have to be your cup of tea on every day of the week. It's just not going to be, but it is, there's not a lot of extra fat on that too. I also left out Rick Ross, who I think is super underrated as an incredible rapper. Currency. It's just this whole last run of people, A$AP Ferg. There are just a lot of good hip-hop artists, and it's amazing how often you have conversations about, oh man, hip-hop nowadays, man, it's just, wow. And I'm like, do you want to go over the list of studs that exist, and amazingly talented people?
When anybody says that about any genre or any piece of art, they're just not tapped into what's coming out.
They gave up.
Yeah, whenever someone says, "Oh, movies aren't the same as they used to be," it's like, no, there are good movies. You just have to find them.
I don't personally these days. I barely go to movies, and I know the issue isn't movies. Yeah. The issue is the golden age of television, in my opinion, and the fact that I love TV shows. My schedule's gotten crazy. I'm older. Yeah. I don't go to movies. But yeah,
job to go to movies.
It just, things change. I couldn't agree with you more on that.
What was your first? Before we get to audience questions, I'm curious. What was your first album? Your first hip hop album?
The first full length hip hop album that I personally owned was by a group called Super Lovers C and Casanova Rudd, a New York group. They had an album called Girls I Got 'Em Locked. It's heads know it. It was a big New York record in 1988. It was a big New York record. I don't know how much it got beyond the East Coast, but my dad bought it for me because my brother started getting me into hip hop in like '87 when I was like 8 years old, and my dad went to I started getting into it too. So my dad was stopped by like the Wiz or whatever in Maryland, in DC, and came home one day and was like, "Here you go," and I was like, what is this?"
What a dad.
And he was like, yeah, I went to the store and I asked the kid who works there, like, what's the new rap tape? And it's Super Lover C and Casanova Rudd. Wow. And the Girls I Got 'Em Locked, which, by the way, thank you, Dad, because you totally unknowingly gave me a group to name drop that's so obscure even to this day. But they're around. Shout out to those guys. But yeah, that was the beginning. But really the first song that really drew my brother and I in it's the opposite of that. Lose all the sort of underground credibility.
Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch.
Close, but you're not that far off. Parents Just Don't Understand. Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. It's
a little bit cooler than Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch.
It is absolutely cooler, but it is still, I mean, it was, you can't even put into words how big Parents Just Don't Understand was. It was the beginning of true rap crossover to pop. Like my memory is...
Right? Summertime by
Fresh Prince. Yeah, but by then, that's 91. Summertime comes out, he already has Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Yeah, that's right. So this is what led to Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It's 1987. My recollection of hearing that song is literally being in the backseat of a carpool to Hebrew school. And it being on the radio was like, this song, Parents Just Don't Understand, was ginormous. And I love Fresh Prince to this day because of that album. There's a few good songs in there.
Let's get some questions from our audience. Here's a question.
Hi, Rosenberg.
Hi.
Hi, my name's Regina, and I'm a media studies major at NYU, and I'm focused on broadcast and production. So as someone who is so in love with this genre, especially radio, do you feel like it's a dying genre? Do you think with streaming being so large now, with YouTube and social media making stars, do you feel like it's a dying genre? And then also, as a Black woman, we seem to not have a real voice in radio. It seems like we have the Yesies and the Angie Martinez and the Laura Stiles, the Angela Yees, who are all amazing. But I don't see or hear people like me. So I'm wondering what your opinion of that is.
So two very good questions. Thank you, Regina. I'll start with number one. Radio is different than it was. However, I recently had a meeting. Everyone... I'll move away from streaming because that's sort of a separate thing and relates more to music sales. And I'll make it more about podcasting versus radio, right? Which I think is a little bit more relevant specifically to what we're talking about. And I was talking to someone about podcasting who's in that business, and I'm in that business as well. And they said the podcast business made something like in advertising last year. It was around $400 million. In the same year, radio, which is dying, which is not what it was, made $17 billion in advertising. So
People still got cars.
people still have cars, and people still like free. And people still know the stations they grew up on. And then they have their kids listen to the stations they grew up on. So it's really interesting because the money is not what it was. There's a reason I work 8 jobs. It's not just because I love to work. If I had one, if I had the same chair I'm sitting in mornings of Hot 97 over 10 years, if I had this same seat 20 years ago, I wouldn't need to work other jobs. I'd probably be like, I'm tired. I'm going to go home and relax. So it has changed in terms of that. And that $17 billion now was a much bigger number then. But that being said, relative to other forms that people are much more excited about because they're new media, radio still does quite well.
Instead of tuning into the radio, they're plugging in their phone to Spotify to listen to those songs as opposed to listening to the radio in the morning.
Yeah, it definitely happens. I mean, it puts you in a spot where you have to work. If you tune into Ebro in the morning, frankly, and this is not to just sound like a jerk, but you're listening for us. You are not tuned in for the morning. It means that you either like us or the Breakfast Club, if that's your choice. Whatever your choice is, you're doing it. Good answer. Whatever your choice is, you're making the choice for those personalities because you're right. I love our DJs. They're amazing, but their hands are somewhat tied. So it's hard when an artist blows up on SoundCloud on Tuesday. On Thursday, you're now listening to that. Regina and her friends, you're listening every day. You're like, oh, this is the song. That song, for it to make its rotation at radio, requires a lot of time, work, research. So that is a fact, what you just said. Yes, there are people who do that. That being said, of the people that are listening, you got to just do your best to do well with that number. That number's smaller than it used to be. And that will probably continue to be the case. But I do think that radio has basically bottomed out. I don't think it's going to get listened to much less than it is now. I believe podcasts, streaming, I'm not saying it's completely topped out, but I think at this point, it has really made it into the mainstream world. Like, a lot of our parents now know how to podcast and know how to listen to streaming services or iTunes or whatever. So I think the jobs will be there. And to your second question, yeah, I do think the black woman perspective is missing from radio a bit. Certainly in this market. I know of other markets where that voice is more prevalent. In DC, it certainly is and was. Philadelphia as well. But in New York, I agree. I don't know why that is, to be honest with you. It's very interesting. I mean, I can only speak on my experience at Hot. And the experience at Hot is just sort of random, that the people who ended up there ended up in the spots they were in. Like for so many years, it's been Funkmaster Flex, black man at night, and Angie Martinez, Puerto Rican woman during the day. Sort of the perfect ethnic balance of the hip-hop world in New York. Hot has always had a very heavy Latino presence in the DJs there. We joke about it a lot. Like there's a lot of Spanish being spoken. Hot 97 has always been the case. The fact of the matter is, though, that's true of a lot of New York also. So why is that? I'm not sure. And is there a gap? Yes, there is. How do you turn that into an opportunity? Yes, I agree with that. And we do have internships.
Nobody wants an internship.
Yes. And you should, and I will tell you who to reach out to, and you should. Are you still in school, correct?
I am.
Perfect. Well, as long as you're still in school, that is still a possibility. Although I'll tell you, internships are getting more problematic at every job I have. At ESPN, I have no interns. At Hot, almost all the interns now come through a program in which they're like paid. The unpaid, have you seen this already? The unpaid intern thing
It's gone.
is going away. And it's gone away, I'm guessing, because of a weird mix of like poor treatment and perverts and a variety of bad things. But like we used to have are just endless list of unpaid interns, so many of which went on to be our friends and colleagues and assistants. And there aren't as many. So that is something that's difficult. But those are both two really good questions. I wish I had a more concrete answer. But I'll tell you this, though, about black women. I do believe that in all forms of media, this is the time for black women. And I do say that, and I'm very blunt and honest when I talk to people. Black men, too. Like, if you have a really good skill set in media and want to be in front of the camera, I'll tell you this, it is not the same. I'm sure it is not an even playing field, but it is the best it's ever been, and it's not even close. And like, there are places that I know from my agents telling me, we're in meetings, they're like, oh, sorry. I'm like, what about that job? And they just go, they're not looking for a white man, dude. You're out. Forget it. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, oh, okay. But I get it. You know what I'm saying? And like, so it's a good opportunity. The time is now to go for it.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Next question. Thank you.
Hi, like I told you outside, I really enjoyed the debut episode.
Thank
and
you.
I wanted to know, with doing everything that you do, how do you balance the time in your schedule? And is there an ideal guest that you would love to interview? And is there somebody like late night that inspires you to do this show?
Okay, 3 good questions. I'll work backwards.
Let's limit them to one after this.
Okay. Now, I'll work backwards quickly. My current favorite late night person is Jimmy Kimmel. I love Jimmy Kimmel. I'm a huge fan. I am a smart, funny, snarky late night guy. I am not a goofy late night guy. So I'm way Kimmel over Fallon, even though I think Fallon's like a great talent. I'm not a Corden Fallon guy. I'm a Kimmel guy. I love Carson. Carson's biography inspired me a lot. There are a lot of people I really love. I love Letterman, you know. But now, even other shows that, at this point, even Andy Cohen's show is influential, and Bill Maher's show is influential from a style standpoint. From a host standpoint, though, Kimmel's my dude. Ideal guest, yeah, I want he's a good friend of mine, but I have not interviewed him in years. I want Donald Glover on the show. He is the most talented person in entertainment. Period.
I hadn't watched
believe.
any of Atlanta this season, and I tuned in. I like pulled up a random episode the other day, and it was just like, oh, goddamn, this show is so good. Like, the writing in the show is just unbelievable.
Donald Glover's so talented that Lin-Manuel Miranda would look at Donald Glover doing something like, I don't even know what the hell this guy's doing. You know what I'm saying? Like, Donald does things that I know from knowing him, I know he's a regular human being. When I watch the show, I'm like, you're an alien. Like, your brain, you're thinking of things. He said recently at some point that, like, he compared the show to Curb. Curb Your Enthusiasm is one of my all-time favorite shows. And they're not even on the same level. Like, I love Curb. Curb can't even sit in a category near Atlanta. Atlanta covers so many different things culturally. I don't understand any episode. I get 40% of every episode. And the time is just, man, you got to get naps. Naps are very important. Pick your spots, sleep on the weekend. I nap almost every day, although I didn't this week because of rehearsals and being here today. This is the first week ever that I have not napped one day this week. And even yesterday, I still caught like 25 minutes. But normally I do like 2 hours a day in the middle of my day, and that's a big part of my life.
Do you remember that period of time with Donald Glover? I'm going back to Donald Glover for a second.
Please.
Where I think it was before the first Childish Gambino album came out and prior to Atlanta, and he had just left Community, right? Mm-hmm. And he had left some notes which were clearly, in retrospect, we can say were like lyrics at this point, but they were about depression and sadness. And everyone was like, oh, this guy has like, you know, fallen off. He quit the show, too big for his britches. He's not going to be that talented, and this is going to go poorly. Do you remember that like brief window of time?
I don't remember that sentiment, though I believe that it existed. I remember the time, though, and him leaving.
It wasn't my sentiment. I do remember people writing about it.
I'm sure
It's just so funny to be like, you know, 5 years later, it's like
his whole thing is a complete blur to me because I'll tell you this briefly if you don't mind, because I find it kind of interesting. So my Childish Gambino story is my brother-in-law, who is no longer with us. I was home maybe the last time I ever spent time with him, and he was just obsessed with Donald Glover. And he was like, oh, I just went to his concert. He raps half of it, and then he does a comedy show. And he was like, he's the best ever. And at the time, he was a freshman in college. He was 18. He was like, he's the best ever. Like, you don't understand how talented he is. And like, my brother-in-law Spencer, I had immense respect for him. He was a kid. I just like he always was on to good stuff, and I was like, word.
If anybody said to me he raps for the first half and does stand up for the last half, I'd be like, I'm not gonna.
Right, maybe not.
I don't think I want to see that.
So I probably, honestly, in retrospect, I probably had that thought. I was like, all right. And then he like sent me some of his music. He played me Freaks and Geeks, the song Freaks and Geeks. And I was like, oh, this is pretty good. So fast forward a very short time after that, and my brother-in-law was killed in a car accident. And so in our time dealing with it, for anyone who's ever been through anything like that, you find yourself going into the things that person loved and being like, what did they love? Oh, they loved this. And you just start like loving it yourself. You're just like, I need to see what he was hearing. I wanted to know what Spencer was thinking. So I reached out to Questlove and I said, you're friends with that Donald Glover guy, right? He was like, yeah, absolutely. I said, can you give me his number? I need to holler at him. So he did, and I called him and I told him about my brother-in-law, and Donald's family was visiting, and he was on the top of the Empire State Building with his family who was in New York at the time. And he like walked away, and I told him this, and I'm like, dude, I'm sorry to tell you this, and like this emotional sort of story while you're like hanging out with your family, but I was like, the bottom line is, my brother-in-law loved you, and I got your back. Like I'm here for it. I'm here for whatever this Donald Glover thing is. I'm here for it. And he was like, wow, like that means a lot to me, and that was the beginning of our relationship. A lot happened between then of us doing things together and interviews and freestyles and songs and all kinds and just hanging out. But the short of it is I met him and fell in love with him because of Spencer. I had no clue. And that's why I'm like so passionate about it. I had no clue. I was like looking into the eyes of one of the greatest talents that like anyone could ever fathom. So to me, it's been this bizarre experience of when people mention him, they're like, oh, what do you think of Donald? Because it's like a given that he's a genius, which is like this weird, they're like, Donald Glover, I mean, he's a genius. And I'm like, yeah, I know, that's like what he is. So it's just been fascinating. And it's so cool to me that Spencer, this 18-year-old kid, had like such a clairvoyant thought about Donald Glover and just nailed it. Like there's no one more talented. You name to me someone who's better at creating in two different fields than Donald Glover, ever. I don't know if it's ever been done.
No, I don't know.
Well done. Didn't last, though.
No, that's true. I think we have time for one more. Back there.
Hey, Peter. Huge fan of you, and I appreciate your view in music. So
Thanks,
my
man.
question is, one of my favorite interviews of yours at Hot 97 was with Azalea Banks.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, do you have any views of her music right now? You think she could come back, and would you ever have her on the show?
Thanks, man.
Okay.
The first song was just like...
That was awesome. Well, her first album actually is a brilliant piece of work. So Azalea Banks hates my guts. I don't know why.
I don't think you're alone in that club.
No, I'm not at all. It is a popular club. I do not know.
Stewardesses, random people on the street, labels.
I know. Artists here and there. So I'm not exactly sure, but I'll answer all your questions. I have not heard her new music. I just heard Nicki say that it was really good, so that made me curious to check it out, because that Nicki Minaj saying that I thought was interesting. I've not heard it in a while because I have a personal, like when someone literally says horrible things about you, you're just kind of like, although I oddly do still check if it comes down my path, I still will click, but I just don't seek it out the same way. I would definitely have her on the show again. Her talent has not been, she's a freakish, brilliant person who has not seen the levels that she can go to. She's her own worst enemy. I think she has some demons that are just a little bit unchecked that could probably be solved with some conversation and work. But I think she's an incredibly talented, sensitive artist who also I was very close with at a time. But yeah, I think she's a great talent, and I would love to see her make a comeback. I'm always down for the comeback story. I think we all, Americans of every race and ethnic background, no matter what we say, we root against people, and then we end up rooting for people. And I think we
love the comeback and the takedown.
We love it. I do a podcast with Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson's up, down, up. It's like everyone was like, this guy's the best. And then they were like, wait, I think he's crazy. He's terrible. He's gone. Oh, Mike Tyson. You don't want to see him. He's crazy. Now it's like, yo, Mike Tyson, I saw The Hangover. He has a one-man show. I love his book. People, that's what America is. We like to see people rise back up. And I think people would be happy for Azalea if she really got it together and dropped a dope, complete project. I think people would be really happy and excited for it.
Peter, thanks for coming in, man. The show Open Late with Peter Rosenberg is on Complex's YouTube channel every Thursday night, right? But then, obviously, as we said, it lives on after. You can watch it with everyone.
Yes, when you leave here, you should go on Complex's YouTube channel, watch it, and tell everyone you know about it, and like it, and leave a comment. That would be great.
And, of course, people can hear you every morning, Ebro in the morning, right, on Hot 97.
Yes, and every afternoon on the Michael K. Show on 98.7 ESPN, and at WWE pay-per-views, and various podcasts.
Go for it. Just start listing them.
That's it. I'm stopping there.
Peter Rosenberg, everybody. Let's hear it.
Thank you, guys.